Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Hey, it's Carter Bear, and you're listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast.
Welcome to episode 86 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. Once again, today, you guys are not going to hear a cheesy cold open because we have a special guest that has joined us today. He's been the host of Hockey Prospect Radio Show on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio now for the past 21 years. He's also a well-known scout in the world of hockey and the author of the book, The Art of Scouting. This man has an MBA in hockey management, people. And most importantly, though, he's someone I consider a good friend. He's Shane Malloy. Shane, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Gentlemen, how are you today?
Not bad.
Doing well.
Not bad. Excited to have you on. We know the draft is just over a week away, so we're really excited to get some questions in about that. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone where they can find us. Check us out on our Twitter page at Flying Octopod. You can also follow us on YouTube at The Flying Octopod. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Shane, I want to get your thoughts to start off with on the Dylan Larkin situation as we enter week 3 of this dilemma for Steve Yzerman and the organization. We saw right after the trade request was made public that he submitted a list of teams that included Florida, Minnesota, and Vegas. Since then, we've heard rumors that the list has expanded. What are your thoughts on this situation with Detroit and the player Dylan Larkin as it stands today?
Well, I think he's been a loyal soldier for the Detroit Red Wings organization. Like, he's stuck it through, some really lean years. They haven't made the playoffs in, what are we running at, a decade now? So
it's counting.
And yeah. And when you're going through that as a player in your entire career, I mean, someone who's just been there year after year and overall has been really highly consistent of a player and been the team captain and been out front and center for the organization. I can certainly understand his frustration as a competitor of wanting to make the playoffs and be on a competitive team and try to win, give your opportunity. So I understand it from his perspective 100%. And I think, finally that, it was the straw that broke the camel's back in that respect. So I can't fault him looking at it from his perspective of just saying, okay, my time is done. I've been a loyal soldier. I've done whatever I can for this organization. We haven't got where we needed to be. He can only control what he can control. His own game and what happens in the locker room because he's the captain. And then from now it's in the ballpark. Now it's in the hands of the Detroit management group and what they're going to be able to turn this around and what type of assets they're going to get in return. And I'm not sure how this is going to play out, whether it's a combination of picks, prospects, and players. Ideally, that's probably what they would want: a player, a pick, and a prospect, and a high-level prospect. Because he's still, even though he's 30, and with his skating ability, he's probably got 4 really good years left in him before, age catches up to everybody, and then that curve starts to swing pretty wildly. So we'll see what happens. And it's going to be interesting because the draft's really close and those trades tend to sometimes happen right before the draft. And there's always teams that are looking for centermen. Like it's a position that's highly coveted in the NHL.
Yeah, there appears to be a lot of blame to go around within the organization as to how we got here. Obviously, you just mentioned the 10-year playoff drought, which is arguably the biggest factor. But I want to know, what does it say about Yzerman and the front office when a homegrown talent like Dylan Larkin, who has spent his entire career playing hockey in the state of Michigan, he's the face of the franchise. But what does it say about the organization that the captain's asked for a trade just 3 years into an 8-year deal that he signed in 2023?
Well, it's this frustration of just simply not winning. Now, obviously, he was here before Yzerman took over as a general manager and they changed their staff and there was a lot of movement inside the hockey operations department and changeover. But it's been 7 years since this management group has had the opportunity. I think it's fair to say they've had enough time to get themselves into the playoffs. Don't have to be a contender, but just to get into the wild card spot. I think that's fair. That's fair from the fan base standpoint, from a media standpoint, from an ownership standpoint, from the player standpoint. I think that's fair. And obviously they're trying to rebuild this from the bottom up, which is in many cases the right thing to do from a drafting development standpoint. And patience is necessary. Players take a long time to develop. On average, it's depending even if you're a high first round pick, to go into the NHL and actually contribute, you're looking at between 3 to 5 years. So if you look back even at the first 5 years of drafting this regime, like those players are 21 plus already. So there should be enough pieces that should get them into the playoffs. And just for whatever reason, they haven't been able to make that happen from a draft development standpoint. And then acquisitions, many of their acquisitions, when I looked at them, go, okay, looks like they're buying time. They're not buying players. It looked like they're buying time, but perhaps they just didn't bring in overpaid or overplayed their hand in some respects and got stuck with contracts that they really didn't want. And I think it's come back to bite them a little bit in that respect. So it's really actually, I'm a little bit surprised that Detroit is where they are at this point in time. I thought they would be much closer, if not where Montreal is, to be honest. In because they've had enough. I think they've had enough track record to get there. It's just sometimes it's the law of probability, gentlemen. Is you can make the right decision, but no decision is going to be 100%. Could be, heck, I would take anything at 60%. If I knew this was a 6% chance of doing it, I'm going to do it because that's a high percentage. Just for them, it looks like every time they're pulling out a card out of the deck, it's like they're crapping out on the blackjack table and busting.
Yeah, and one of the things we're seeing with these teams, especially the three that were first mentioned on his trade list, these are teams that don't have a lot of prospects. And there's a lot of talk that Yzerman could, hold out for the right deal. But as someone who's an expert on prospects, in your mind, who do you think is the best trade partner for Detroit in this situation?
Well, in terms of the depth of prospects and the best assets for Detroit, I would be targeting Anaheim. I'd target New Jersey. I would certainly. I'd target Montreal, even though, look, same division. You got to do what's best for your organization. San Jose as well. So, you're looking for a player, a prospect, and a pick. If it's Dylan Larkin, he's a first line center in the NHL. Like he's going to give you 75 points a year. So it'll be interesting to see where, Chicago is another one, although I'm not sure if he would want to go there. Just because they're not quite there yet. But San Jose is an up-and-comer. They're going to be dangerous quickly.
I know a lot of people are talking about the Mammoth, too, as well, looking to make a big splash as a new organization.
That's a possibility as well.
And with prospects like Tej Ginla, Caleb Denoye, and also Simashev, we're all curious, waiting to see if there's a bigger package if they decide to move. Our prospect Sebastian Cossa was the organization's top goaltending prospect. So it's going to be a really interesting summer for Steve Yzerman. He's got his hands full heading into this draft. Last question on this situation, because we want to get to the prospects part. That's the meat and potatoes of this episode that we're looking forward to. But should Red Wings fans moving forward be concerned about free agency because of this situation, about bringing players in? Because like we said, this, the homegrown face franchise of the kid wants out. Players talk. There's been the speculation that winning the gold medal in the Olympics, those players want to play with each other. Like, should fans be worried that this is going to impact free agents coming to Detroit in the foreseeable future?
No, because they're original six franchise and they treat their people great. Like they really do. They have fantastic facilities. It's a great rink. Like amazing fan base. Great ownership. I mean, honestly, you couldn't ask for anything better in terms of if you're a player, you're going to original six. They take care of you. They have a rich tradition, and it's a great place to play, and the travel's reasonable. So for me, no. I mean, one of the things is because of what's happened with the salary cap is it's no different than what happens when a government prints too much money. It's the automatic inflationary tactic. It happens every time. Every time a country prints too much money, it's inflation. And this is what's happened with the NHL. There's been this 2-year rapid rise of cap. So now cap dollars actually are not worth as much anymore. It's like because it's supply and demand. So you treat it just like a weak dollar. So everybody has cap money, so it's not valuable. And then on top of that, over the last year, because they seen it coming, everybody started signing all their players for long-term deals. So what it does is it swung the pendulum towards trading. And the only way to make really great trades, ideally for you as an organization, is to understand your asset buckets. So as many picks as you possibly can have is necessary in an asset bucket. Your prospects is another bucket. And then what is on your roster. And then obviously salary cap matters to a degree, but not so much anymore. So the teams that have the fullest asset buckets of all those have the opportunity to make the most trades. And that's where drafting, particularly in the 2nd and 7th rounds, really matters, so that you have a large collection of assets to play from. I look at the 2nd and 7th round similar to, it's almost like Moneyball in baseball, is you don't have to hit home runs. Every time you head to the plate and you're drafting players and you're drafting for the ceiling, and maybe they have a lower floor, but you strike out, you got a donut. You can't afford to have any zeros on your draft board. You have to hit in the 2nd and 7th rounds, at least one player. You got to get 2 players per draft. So to me, it's about, you don't have to hit these massive players. If somebody says, oh, the guy's only a 3rd-line forward or a number 4 defenseman, yeah, but he's in the NHL, in the best league in the world. So it's a massively valuable asset. So hitting singles and doubles and accumulate as many of those players as you can, because that's where you can start bundling players to make these type of trades. And that's what obviously Minnesota did. They had a lot of 1st-round picks. They put in that huge trade. Now, this is an opportunity where Detroit has a lot of prospects as well in their system, and a lot of guys, and guys still not quite ready to hit the NHL, but they're almost there. So if they think trades are necessary, they do have some assets to make that happen. But they got to start hitting more on that 2nd and 7th rounds more consistently, like they have in the past.
Shane, I know you were at the Combine a couple weeks ago at this point, and there you and NHL teams, media, you guys had the opportunity to meet with some of these prospects face to face, kind of learn more about them, their personality. That's not something that everyday fans can experience, right? They can look at the box scores for these prospects. They can look at, YouTube, film, watch live games, but that only counts for so much of the prospects makeup. There's that psychological side as well. Like, who's a great leader? Who can get a team to follow them? Who can, be that player who's just committed to winning and wants to get better and better. So my question for you is, for those who don't have that same access, how can fans learn more about these draft prospects and even prospects already in the system for that mental makeup to see if they are the right guys to be, part of the team in the future?
That's excessive. That's really challenging for the fans. So the best thing they can do is find as many interviews with that prospect as they possibly can. So I work with Dr. Kevin Willis, who's a performance psychologist. He only works with hockey players, particularly, on the cognitive performance side. And, he's helped me build questions specifically when I do go to the Combine. So what I'm looking for is the how, what, and why of they make decisions. So it gives me an understanding of, what mental and emotional attributes they lean on, and to understand how they handle duress. And some of that you can see from statistical profiles from that standpoint. So and this is one of the dangerous things when you're looking at stats. Not all stats are equal. So if you're looking at the CHL and some kid has 100 points, well, how many of those points are fluff? Because they're not all equal. So I like to look at even strength points. That is one of the primary indicators for me that you're going to be able to play at a pro level, because the vast majority of players who are drafted are not going to be playing on a first unit power play, which is usually a minute in 20 seconds to sometimes a minute and a half. So you're not getting that prime ice time to put up those points. So can you produce 5-on-5? The majority of the time, the players are going to have to play 5-on-5. So I want to know, can you produce 5-on-5, back-to-back nights, 3 and 4 nights on the road against teams above 500, 600, 700? That's what I'm looking for, because even though you may not be able to see an interview with a player, or you get limited interviews, it tells you something about their mental makeup in terms of their ability to handle duress. And I think that's a really interesting factor before you even get a chance to talk to them at the combine. I tend to let people talk to them first, and then I sort of catch them right at the end, but as everybody else is filtering it off to somebody else. So then I can ask my questions without a lot of people either paying attention, or I get the undivided attention of the player himself.
Great, yeah, great answer. And it's something that kind of comes up with the Red Wings right now, right? Because, I mean, you can look at it a number of different ways, but when a captain asks out of his team, his homegrown team he went for rooting up, you hear things about how there's, not the best relationship between, Dylan Larkin and Steve Yzerman, and how his leadership has been called into question. Like, you get more in tune with those things, the prospects, with players already in the system. Like, you want to know that whoever's coming up next, that they're here for the long term, they're committed, they're, they have that mental, like, that ability to go out and win, and you're right, play under duress and be okay with that and still succeed. So, I mean, for the Red Wings system, I know they've had several picks in the last, several high first round picks in the last 7 years. But from what you've seen of Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond, do you find those two players to have like that sort of mental makeup to put a team on their back? And
they're elite. Look, the one thing is, one thing doesn't necessarily relate to the other. Just because Dylan Larkin wants to leave and he's done his time isn't a reflection of what is going on with all the other players in the organization or the prospects. Because if I'm a young player, if I'm, say, a Nate Danielson, if I'm a young forward and I know that Dylan Larkin's leaving, I'm sad that my teammate's leaving. That's unfortunate. But then there's a massive opportunity for me. Like if I'm one of those young forwards, if I'm a young centerman, I'm licking my chops now. I'm sorry that Dylan likes leaving. Great guy, great, like my captain, really, great relationship with him. But it's also a business, and you have to be open to that opportunity. So if I'm a young forward for the Detroit Red Wings, you should be giddy with the opportunity. Like, the top offensive player, your captain, your number one center is leaving. They're just leaving this big hole. Okay, there's a carrot. There's a carrot dangling. Who's going to go get it? That is like, now it should be a dog fight. There should be 3 centermen knife fighting in the back alley trying to get that opportunity. I'm not kidding. Like, if your thought process is, oh, woe is us, it shouldn't be that at all. It should be, oh, okay, fine. You want to go? Okay, sorry to see you go, but now you're gone. Like, at this point, their mindset is he's gone. And whatever happens in the trade. I got to focus on me and this organization and my teammates that are going to be here. And I want that ice time. That's mine. It's mine, and go after it. So that's what I like. The whole focus should be completely different. Like, if I'm the assistant captain in that organization, if I'm a leader, if I'm Moritz Seider, or if I'm Raymond, or any one of the older veterans, even the young veterans there, I'm like, all right, boys, which one of you guys are taking, who's grabbing the brass ring? Like, I would challenge them, because especially Raymond, he's a winger. I'm like, all right, which one of you guys is going to be my centerman? Who's grabbing the brass ring? Who's ready? Who's going into the summer, and who's going to work their ass off, and who's going to prove that they're going to take over Dylan's spot? I want to see it. That would be my response.
I got my money on Marco Kasper in a knife fight in the back alley. I don't know about you.
Yeah, he's a tough hombre.
Going with Kasper too in a knife fight.
Well, I'm ready to run through a wall. I don't know about you.
and so that's what you want. right? You want those young guys to go, this is a great opportunity for me. Like, okay, if we couldn't make it to the playoffs, okay, now we're going to make it to the playoffs. I'm going to lead us into the playoffs. I'm going to be one of the centermen that leads us into the playoffs. That should be your mindset. Like, that's, if I'm a management group in Detroit, that's what I'm looking for. I'm like, okay, which one of these guys is going to like take their game to another level? Who's going to work? Like, it should be a challenge. I'm like, okay, Dylan's leaving us. Who's up next? Who wants this? How bad do you want it? It's now June. Get ready, because early September is coming. So we're going to see. And actually dangle the carrot in front of them, right? Because there's going to be a lot of ice time available for these young centermen, and see if they can grab it and run with it.
So I guess pivoting to the 2026 draft specifically, and I think you maybe have kind of foreshadowed what your answer to this question is going to be, but let's say you're Chris Draper, right? You don't have a first round pick this year in the draft. First time in a while, the Red Wings haven't had a first round pick, so it feels like there's even more of like an importance on, like you've said, hitting on these later picks, right? I'm curious, what is your draft strategy in the second round and beyond if you are Chris Draper?
I would focus on high floor players. I need a player that can play. And on average in the middle second, so they're picking 47, so it's a mid-second, it's a 40% chance of a player playing 200 games. That's the league historical average in the salary cap era. So what I'm looking for is somebody who has already the identity of playing a hybrid second, third line role. It's your identity in your head already. I don't want to have to convince somebody to have to alter their identity. It's really difficult for human beings. We like to anchor into what our belief system is of who we are. And there's so many young players who come into the American Hockey League and think they're going to do X. And I'm like, look, buddy, that's probably not going to happen. If you want to, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a first line player in Grand Rapids, or you want to be a third liner in the NHL? What do you want to do? And so I would focus on players that are more inclined to be a guy that can play on a second line, third line in that second round. So at 47, if I look at my list, I would be targeting players like Ryder Cali, centerman for North Bay, big, strong kid. He's raw, but like very good athlete. I would be looking at Casey Mutrin from the U.S. National Development Program, big, strong kid, up and down winger, like a playoff style player, get leadership, gritty, greasy. You know, that old, the old line that won them, third line that won them Stanley Cups. He fits that kind of mold. I would look at Pierce Marabee as well, out of Owen Sound. He's a firecracker of a player. He's not very big, but man, he's got piss and vinegar in his veins. Like, he comes to play. So those are the three players that, in that grouping that I would really focus on. If you can find a defenseman in there, I'm always an advocate of getting defensemen. When I hear people say, oh, we have too many defensemen, I'm like, no, you don't. You never have enough defensemen. Like, I'll leave you with this stat. Like, I look at it in terms of using, behavioral economic models of supply and demand and scarcity. And on average, in the salary cap era, like if you look at 06 to 2018, for the first 13 years of salary cap, on average, only 16 defensemen out of a draft class will play more than 200 games. That's it. That's one defenseman for every two teams. So if you get a chance to get a defenseman who'll play more than 200 games, I don't care if he's a 4, I don't care if he's a 5, I don't care if he's a 6. He's a defenseman in the NHL, and he's worth millions. Look at what the return was for Ben Sherratt in the trade deadline, or Joel Edmondson. So it tells you about, and the style of defensemen that are coveted. So if you look at, I went back and I started looking at all the players that are the most successful in the playoffs. And it's not just points, but the ones that really help drive their team to wins. And majority of it's off the puck. So I look at those players, and then I look at the trade deadline and which players are coveted by, and what the cost of acquisition for those players are. Then I look at free agency, and I take all those lessons and I apply that weighting back to the draft, which is why, when I get teased that my draft list looks very conservative, and it's big mobile defensemen that are angry. They're going to beat you against the boards, and north-south wingers that bang and crash and get spontaneous goal scoring. And don't get me wrong, I got lots of skilled players in there, but you have to have a certain mentality to win in the playoffs. And there's players that get you to the playoffs, and there's players to help you win in the playoffs. So in the second round, that's what I'd be looking for, is those glue guys in the middle of your lineup that you're going to need to have. Like, look at Carolina when they won. They won with depth. Like, I think they had two players that two forwards I consider that would be first-line players. The rest of their guys are all mashed in the middle of second and third liners. They really didn't even really have much of a fourth line. It was more of a third line. So they won with this depth. So what, Detroit could do very much the same thing, is really strengthen their roster and maybe change the configuration of what their forward group looks like. Or, again, get another defenseman, because you can never have enough big, angry, mobile defensemen out there. It's like going through a car wash. Look at all the defense corps that won Stanley Cups. Tampa, Vegas, St. Louis. Like, they're all big and mobile. Like, only Colorado had a smaller defense corps when they won, and they've only won once. So, I mean, it doesn't, and like Carolina had a couple smaller defense, and, you can win with that, but I'll bank on having a 6'3", 6'4" mobile, lanky defenseman. It's like going through a chain link fence or a car wash. You don't want to do it. So if you can find him in the draft, I'm always an advocate of that.
And I would say too that especially over the last year or so, as the Sending Pelicans of the world have graduated, I feel like the Red Wings are starting to look kind of thin in their prospect pool on defense. So I agree. I think it would be prudent of them to target a few more defensemen. I have kind of one more general question, and it's, is there anyone that comes to mind if I were to ask, who do you think could kind of fall into the Red Wings' lap in the second round? We obviously see players kind of fall down the draft boards, fall from where they're ranked. Is there anybody that you think could kind of fall in their lap in the second round?
And I actually have an add-on to that. Just like looking at this draft class, like, well, every year there is like the consensus top 15, top 20, that no matter what mock it is, these first 15, 20 players are there. And then from like 20 to 45, it's like
deviates
players
pretty hard.
Exactly. Where do you see that cutoff point in this year's class, where it's like after pick 20, 25, what have you, it's like it's anyone's guess who the next 20 picks are?
Well, I'm not an advocate of consensus. I despise consensus. I think every list, like my list is specific based on what I value and how I weight it. So what someone else does on a list, I'm like, I'm not being mean. I just don't care. Right. And these are people that are like our friends. So like, obviously I have Jason Bukala on the show, and we just did a preview of our 33 to 64, which airs this weekend. And we're deviated all over the place. Like, our first round is pretty close. Not in terms of the number of the players that we had. I think we had 3 players difference out of 32, which is like, so I'd say about 80% in the first round. We're pretty close in terms of how we identify players, but there is some differences. But once we start getting into that early part of the second round and beyond, there were some big differences, and it was obvious of the types of players that I covet. And I've mentioned that about the defensemen and centermen, and then if I have to have a winger, I want a big winger that can go up and down the wing and just play hard along the walls and bang some bodies and get some spontaneous goals. So the one player that might fall to 47, who really shouldn't, but is a very highly skilled playmaker on the wall, is Matthias Vannanen from Everett. So, and I say that because if you look at his statistical profile, he went through the draft. He was like about 5 or 6 days away from coming into this draft. So he got, and I think teams will regret not drafting him last year, he's 5'11", almost 6 feet tall. He'll probably play at 185, 187 pounds. So he's not a big guy, but he's excellent playmaker off the wall. And you looked at his statistical profile through the regular season, 70% of his points came 5-on-5. 70. And he was like pushing over 80 points. Goes into the playoffs, has a remarkable playoff run with Everett in the playoffs. Now, when we talk about playoffs, the game is won in the paint, inside that, like in the slot. 79% of his points came even strength in the playoffs. 79. He got better in the playoffs. So he's not a perimeter player, even though he's a smaller player and he's a primary playmaker. I have him at 32. I could see him slip to the middle of second round. And if that happens, even though he's not the big banger and crasher, it's too hard to find players who are that productive 5-on-5. That translates. It says something about not only your willingness to play inside the slot, but it says something about your hockey sense and your understanding how to skate the game, and then your details off the puck. Because if you look at it, so much of our attention span is on the player with the puck or who has the puck. But in all honesty, 95% of the time, if you're a forward in the NHL, you don't have the puck in your stick. So what are you doing off the puck to help your team win, whether your team has the puck or not? Like, defensemen may only have the puck 1 or 2%. They're on the ice. That's it. The highest player we end up tracking last year, I haven't done it for this year, but last year was Barzell, and he was at 8%. So think about that as a player. So when we focus so much on puck skills, by Christmas, I'm telling you, so much of my time, once I've consolidated my list and it's much smaller, I start focusing entirely on their B game. Because if their A game isn't going, do you have a B game to be a valuable asset to to the lineup? Because a coach can't trust you if you don't have a B game. How many like these amazing offensive players never made it to the NHL because they didn't have a B game to speak of, and a coach can't trust them off the puck. So I just really start focusing on what they're doing off the puck, and so I give Matthias Vaninen a lot of credit for that, because even though he's not a big winger, he obviously knows how to play off the puck, because you can't have that type of 5-on-5 even strength production otherwise.
And he's got a friend in the organization already with Carter Bear.
Yep.
Very true. Lots of viewings for the Red Wings, I'm sure.
100%. So I'd be really curious to see if that's a guy that they would target. Now, I don't talk to the teams when it comes to draft eligible players, because they have to do a job, and I'm respectful of the information. Information is power in the NHL. But I'd be curious to see and to hear what they have to say about him after the draft, and those kind of conversations can happen if somebody else drafts him or they draft him, and what'd you think of him? And then we can have those conversations. And so, it's, catching up with, Chris Draper or, Dan Cleary in the player development department, or one of their scouts, and get a kind of a read of what they thought about them. And every scout's a little bit different, even inside organizations. It's never a consensus inside the room either, right? So everybody has their preferences and biases.
I'm glad you mentioned Matthias Vaninen, because he was one of the players that jumped out to me this year in terms of where can the Red Wings find value in the later rounds, and this is exactly the point I made.
Now, he's a value pick, and if he's a mid-second round pick, that's a value pick in my eyes.
100%. And I've seen him mocked so many different places, like even end of first round all the way up to like fifth round I've seen, which, you can say what you want about who is making those picks, but still, it shows the variance there. And another player that I've seen with a similar, I guess, variance, if you will, in terms of where they might be selected as Adam Valentini from the University of Michigan. And
right.
I'm curious for your thoughts on him, because, for what could be generally considered to be a high school senior, he's certainly put up a fair amount of points and looked pretty good for the University of Michigan this year as a freshman.
One of the things that's really impressive, and I think sometimes we lose focus of this, is the average age in the CHL is 18 years of age. The average age in college hockey is 21 and a half. 3.5 years is massive. Like in the CHL, you're playing on average against boys. In college hockey, you're playing against you're playing against men. In some cases, 21, 22, 23-year-olds. So here's an 18-year-old kid playing on a stacked team where there's only one puck, and produced at the level he did 5-on-5, I liked his off puck play. I liked his pace. I liked the fact that he's engaged. And he's another guy who's not very big as a left winger, but I have him projected as kind of like an F7, F8. He's a guy that I would want to have on my third line. I have Vannon in like sort of an F7, maybe an F6. So he's kind of like one of those quasi second line, third line guys that can provide you a lot. The advantage with guys like that, Vannon and or in Valentini, is if they're on a third line at home, that's the opportunity for a coaching staff to put them out against a third pair and exploit them with that with that offensive talent. So, and the other great thing about Valentini is he's already played 1 year of college. So if you can get him 2 more years in at Michigan before he turns pro, all the better. I don't like putting, 19 or 20-year-olds into the American Hockey League. It's a meat grinder. It really is. It's really hard on prospects. I've seen first and second round picks at Christmas time and after they're, in their rookie season in the American League, and you talk to them and they look like a deer caught in headlights. They just look like they got ran over because it's that tough of a league. I think it's really underestimated of how good that league is. So keep him out as long as you possibly can. So if, Valentini's there, I have him at 36. So it's entirely possible he could slide 11 spots. 11 spots in a draft once you get the second round is actually not that significant. It really isn't. Like, that's a tier group. So if I look at my tier group, I have 33 to 43 is a tier group. So it fits right in there. My other tier group below that is 44 to 51. So realistically, I could take any of those players in that tier group and move them around. So if somebody, if they happen to get a Valentini there at 47, I'm like, that's a nice value. That's a player that can fit. I mean, you don't always have to have the biggest guys, but you want a guy who's like got some balls and is engaged and is willing to play in the paint, because that's where all the goals are scored, and that's where things happen.
Watching him throughout the season, you've been on the show before, and we obviously appreciate you coming back. But one thing that I took away from the last time you were here was just the emphasis on a player's B game, and you brought that up already here. And watching Valentini, it just scores. He has great hustle, has that B game. I'm watching I think this guy might be a Shane Malloy guy.
Well, you know what? It's because off the puck, he's got to hustle back on the back check. He has to understand where he's breaking to, understand how to get under sticks, how to pressure players, to be able to help support the defense. Because I played defense, so nobody wanted a slow, short defenseman that chirped and took penalties. So here I am. But as you're backing up versus the rush, you want to know that your wingers, especially, are on the right side of that back check, and they're helping you angle those players to an area where you can blow up a play. And I think he does a really good job in terms of puck support, whether his team has the puck or not, and engaging back in the back check. And when, I was helping my young son's team coach, when I was coaching, is, a lot of the forwards said, oh, we want to score goals. I'm like, oh, you do you? So I'd write on the board, forecheck, back check, paycheck. You want to score goals in hockey? As a forward, that's what you need to do. You got to get the puck back, and you only get it back on the forecheck or the back check. That's it. You got to track back, and you got to hustle, and you got to force players to make plays they don't want to make. So that's what enticed me about his off puck game. Is I really almost at a point ignored his offense because I knew he wasn't going to get prime opportunity offensively or get power play time because it's a stacked team. But if his 5-on-5 off puck play was consistent, there's an opportunity that the coaches are going to trust him. And then when guys graduate, he's going to get that opportunity. And then that's where you're going to start to see more of the offensive production, because you'll get more ozone time and you'll get more power play time.
Well, Shane, we're getting towards the end here. And before I get to my last question, I want to thank you for, again, coming on with us and
anytime, gentlemen.
Wisdom. So we talked about the second round. I'm curious if there's any guys you want to highlight that the Red Wings could find value in the later rounds.
I always tend to focus, once I get sort of out of I try to I project how many players I think will play 200 games or more. This year I hit 61, which is a little bit higher than average. So I think the quantity could be higher. But then you're looking at, like, once you start to get into, so I'm looking at, they have a pick at 79. So then you're sort of looking at guys like Jonas Silverstone from Prince Albert, a Liam Lefebvre out of Chicoutimi, a Brett Liskey, defenseman out of Everett, Alexander Bilecki, a defenseman out of Kitchener. You're looking for some guys that are willing to play a role and could play a role on a third line or a third pairing defense. If you can find somebody with a high floor, at that point, that's where I know there's just an argument about swinging for the fences, and I think you can do that. You can mitigate the risk in your draft if you have more picks, so that you can go for more balance between floor and ceiling, and then you can balance it so that you've got players throughout your draft. If you have a limited number of picks, like Detroit's got 47, 79, 143, like there's some slim pickings in there. So I would probably tend towards picking more to the floor, just to ensure that you have a player. Because if you start swinging for the fences and going all ceiling, and maybe the player really doesn't have a defined B game at all, if all of a sudden you could look at this draft class and go, we have a donut. We got nobody. Now we just spent millions of dollars. We have all this sunk cost. And then now we have to replicate that somewhere in a trade or free agency. And you don't want to do that, because that ends up costing you 2 to 3 times as much. So I would focus on high floor players.
Shane, last question for you. And I just wanted to get this out there. The 2026 draft, where would you rank this as far as the strength of draft that we've seen like in the last couple of years?
Well, I think the quantity of players will probably be average to maybe slightly above average. So historical average is 59 players will play 200 games. So I have in that 59 to 61 range. So I think that's fair. I think the quality of this draft is really going to depend on the defense. There's a lot of high-end defensemen, really high. And when a draft class has a lot of quality defensemen, it really ups the value of the draft class, because defensemen are so valuable. Look at the cost of acquisition for a number 1, a number 2, or a number 3 defenseman in trades or free agency. It's ridiculous, the acquisition cost, whether it's free agency or trade. It's outrageous. And so it should be, because they're so valuable. So if this draft class, like when I look at my list, I have obviously, the big guys up front with Reed, Karls, Verhoff, Rudolph, and Smits, those top 5. But right into that second grouping, I have Gustafsson and Lynn up there too. And then not far behind them in the next, at 19, 20, 21, I have Hackinson, Sherbakov, and Pipparainen. So I have 10 defensemen in my top 21. One, it tells you how much I covet defensemen, particularly if I think they're going to play as a number 3 or higher. So, or a number 4 or higher. So I have Pipparainen, Sherbakov, and Hackinson as 4s. So that tells me something about this draft class. So we'll see what happens. Maybe in the Larkin trade, they get a first round pick and then they're in there. And I'll leave you this one, because I think it would be a Detroit style player on the defense core that the fans would love. So I got to give Scott Wheeler credit for this. This came from a quote that he got, and he was talking to William Hackinson, and they were asking about players that he liked. And it was funny, because as a Swede, he liked Mikkola, the defenseman out of Florida, big, tough defensive defenseman. And so, why do you like him? He's violent. I'm like, sold. That's my kind of player. I want a defenseman back there who inspires and appreciates the violence of playing that position, and will enact some fear in the forward. So, if you're they get a draft pick in, say, the 20s, and Hackinson's there's a nice defense partner for Pellikka in the future. Hey, don't worry, you just do whatever you want to do, Axel. I'll take care of everything over here. And if anybody comes near my net, then, bring out the battle axe and start swinging away, because that guy's a Viking.
Yeah, I love the name too. How fitting that it is.
Yeah, Shane, it's perfect.
Shane, I know this is the busiest time of the year for you with the draft coming up next week, and I can't wait to join you there in Buffalo. You've got a lot of things going on in the next week or so. Tell us where we can find you. I know NHLXM radio with your Hockey Prospects radio, but where else can we find your work in the weeks leading up to the draft?
That's it. Like, if you want to find all our work on NHL Network Radio, you have to have the SiriusXM. So on the SiriusXM app, Jason Buchel and I did 32 prospect profiles, a 10-minute profile of the top 32 players that we were talking about. We did that all the entire month of May. So there was 8 hours. And then we did another 6 hours of draft preview. So we talked about our top 32 list, our 33 to 64. And then we did another show discussing player development, how that impacts leading into the draft, and then the cognitive side, neurological testing. So, and then Jason and I got into talking about draft list methodology, and then player evaluation methodology, and the types of different methodology you use to perform both of those tasks. Because evaluating is one thing, and building the list is an entirely different thing. And trust me, I have now a triple garage full of skeletons of the mistakes I've made over the years. So, yeah, wisdom comes from making a lot of mistakes and then swearing at your computer afterwards.
And then during the draft, you're also evaluating picks as well, right? Live?
Yeah, the NHL Network Radio does the show live from the draft floor, so that you can listen to the show on Channel 91 on SiriusXM for the first round.
That's awesome. And you can follow Shane at Shane Malloy on Twitter for all the best news on prospects. He is one of a kind, a great friend. I can't thank you enough, man, for doing this. We always enjoy having you on. We could listen to you talk all day. I know it's getting late there.
Be careful.
I know, but thanks, man. We really appreciate having you, and we hope to have you back on again soon, maybe after the draft, so we can talk about how the Red Wings did. So,
gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And so with that, we're going to wrap episode 86 here, the Flying Octopus podcast. We will be back next week, hopefully live from the draft in Buffalo. Shane, I got the first couple rounds at Anchor Bar. Tony's told us about him getting a little food poisoning there from the chicken wings, so I'm a little concerned, but I'm still gonna go that route. And
you'll be okay, Tony.
I think we're gonna have a good time and eat well.
I'll take all the Labatt. Just 2 for 2 with the wings.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.